Hey guys, welcome to Midweek Move. So glad to have you guys here with us, wherever you're joining us, YouTube, Facebook, however. Hey, thank you for being part of our community. I am really excited about today's conversation because today I'm sitting down with a mentor, a friend, a former professor of mine, Garland Owensby from Southwestern Assemblies of God University. And while I'm excited about this, because of the way that we had to do this interview, we had some technical difficulties. So I'm afraid that the audio and the visuals won't be quite as good as what you guys are used to here, coming from us here at the Midweek Move. But the conversation is really, really good. And we really get into some really interesting behind-the-scenes aspects about what's taking place in today's chapter. So I really encourage you guys to lean in, listen carefully to what's being said, and take some notes as to what is being said, and give us some feedback. Let us know your thoughts on what's being said today. All that being said, let's get into today's conversation. Today on the Midweek Move, we're talking about what it's like to trust in Jesus while you're trusting in the system. Hello and welcome to the Midweek Move, the show where we take a look at scriptures line by line, verse by verse, and we ask ourselves, what does it mean in context and how do we walk it out? And we're so glad to have you guys here with us, whether you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, or you've found us on one of the podcast catchers out there, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Hey, thank you for inviting us to where you're at and being part of our community. Today, guys, I'm excited because I'm being joined by someone I like to consider a mentor of mine, a friend of mine, someone who I find to be hysterical and challenging. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Garland Owensby.
Yeah, no pressure there, Dallas. And you've got a great voice for this too. I feel like I've got to lower my voice. Maybe just
you got a good voice. Oh man!
Well, hey, thanks for inviting me out here today.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who don't know Garland is he's a professor at Southwestern Assembly God University, SAGU, and you're a comedian and a father. And what else do you do? I feel like you do everything out there.
I'm a husband.
There you go. All right.
Well, and we host a small group of middle schoolers at our house on Sunday nights. So we're still active in youth ministry all these years later.
Right.
Get to travel, doing camps, convention, training, all sorts of fun stuff like that. But right now, my focus is I've got a one son that's married.
Wow.
And I've got two sons. One's graduated. One's about to graduate in May. So I'm just prepping to not have any kids at home right now. So there's a tinge of sadness. Well, yeah, I used to joke because our one son, when he was 15, we had to buy him a new mattress. And the guy at the mattress store kept saying, this one, it's got a 10-year warranty. And I was like, do you have one with a 3-year warranty? Something, when he turns 18 is going to be uncomfortable. And now that they're moving out, I'm sad. Oh. I love my boys.
Oh, so. Yeah. It's kind of weird for you to say that age, because I remember when I was a student there 15 some odd years ago that they looked younger.
Yeah. Well, they're like all my boys are 6 foot, 6'2". They're great guys and posing. If I went to school with them, they would have beat me up. So,
Wow, that went dark quick. So, oh man. So one of the things I love about our show here is that we bring in a lot of people who have different perspectives, that have a lot of different worldviews, and have a unique voice. I've mentioned this several times in the past, but Garland, I'm excited about you because you have a unique voice in the fact that you are a teacher, and but you are currently teaching a couple of specific classes that actually are in the background of this book. What are those classes you're teaching over there at SAGU?
Well, a few things. I teach a class called Bible Study, which it's introductory hermeneutics.
Right.
And kind of the first day of class, I tell them, I said, my job is to help you understand the Bible so that you can be the best, deacon or the best small group leader, because we have people that aren't going to become pastors in that class.
Right.
And then the other side is I say, my goal is to keep you out of a cult. Right. And so we teach them, how do you find the Greek? How do you find the Hebrew? How do you find the historical cultural background? Those sort of things. And really trying to empower every student, regardless of their major, that they too can interpret scripture. So that plays a role. But the other one that I don't teach often it's called Pastoral Epistles and Thessalonian Epistles. And what we're able to do with just about every single one of Paul's letters is to go, this is where he was in the book of Acts.
Right.
So the pastoral epistles they're the only ones that we can't go, all right, we know exactly where this is placed in the book of Acts. And that's a whole nother, rabbit trail to go down. But we know when he's writing Thessalonians, it's not too long after the events that are going to happen here in Acts 25.
Right. So it's really interesting because these are the background things. And when you understand, this is the reason why it's important to read not just a portion of the scriptures, but the entire context, because the picture becomes so much more dynamic. When you get to the pastoral epistles, you guys need to come into it with understanding that Paul's been in prison for 2 years. He's been doing all these things. And again, I want to encourage you guys to check out last week's episode. We left off with Felix leaving Paul in prison, basically for 2 years, expecting a bribe from him and him not being willing to give that up. And then there's this change of power. And he's like, all right, well, I'm out. See you, Paul. Just left him in prison, which now brings us to chapter 25. So let's just jump right into it. Starting in verse 1, it says this. Now, when Festus had come to the province, after 3 days, he went up to Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him, that he would summon him to Jerusalem while they lay in ambush along the road to kill him. What's just happening here, Garland?
It's interesting because we look and we go, oh, this is corruption. Really, to the Romans, it was just a way of life. This is what you did. We know historically 50% of the Roman population they were enslaved. Right. And it's not the harshness that we think of today. Even though I do not want to make every part of this equal, but it's almost like being a minimum wage worker where it's easy for somebody to go, why don't you just quit and get a job? It's like, you don't understand. I live paycheck to paycheck, sometimes day to day. Right. I can't just pick up and leave without hardship. Right. And so since there was no social safety net, there was no Medicare, there was no, Social Security, anything like that. And so you were dependent upon your family, or you were dependent on somebody who was really rich to take care of you. And that person was called the patron. And so the whole Roman Empire, if you want to, it's almost like The Godfather, It's like, okay, you're the patron and I'm going to come to you and I'm going to ask you for a favor. And that favor could be financial. It could be judicial. It could be any number of things. And so once you rose to that level of emperor, you were like a god. Yeah. But then these other governors and their object was, how am I going to attain the power? Well, how do you attain power? You get a lot of people that owe you a lot of favors. And so this is a case where the Jewish leaders were looking and they were saying, we're looking to Festus as our savior. He's the one that we want the favor from. They don't need the favor from Paul. Paul is just an annoyance to them. And if they can just get him out of the way. So it's kind of unlikely bedfellows. Right. But the problem with this is when they ask Festus for a favor, what's going to happen is he's going to hold them accountable as well. So one day he's going to ask them for a favor. So really they're striking an allegiance with someone they don't want to be in bed with. Really. Right.
It's a really crazy situation you see taking place here because there's a lot of things that we don't see just from reading the text. You have to kind of dig in and understand a little bit. And I think one of the problems that I see personally is a lot of times we'll look at the text with an American mindset, a 2022 American mindset, and we're going, there's a lot of deep stuff happening here in the background, which is why we need to read other things.
Yeah. The whole issue of power dynamics is very important in the first century, that if you were a slave, you had no power. Right. If you were a woman, you had no power. If you were young, you had no power. If you were not male and if you didn't own property, you had no power. Right. And so you were dependent on those in power to protect you. especially when the government wasn't going to protect you. And so that whole power dynamic was just very different than it is today. Which I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in on this. This is the beauty of the church. Anytime somebody's like, oh, patriarchy, early church and stuff. And I'm like, no, you don't understand that when Paul writes and he says, neither slave nor free, Jew nor Gentile, none of this matters anymore. And when we eat communion together, when we eat the Lord's Supper together, we're proclaiming that all these earthly institutions don't have the same power and don't give us the same status as being in the body of Christ does.
Exactly. Which, again, it's that whole dynamic shift of everything. Even like when you look at what Paul's written, like he's talking about women in ministry. He's talking about young people doing ministry. He's empowering so many people, which is so countercultural that day. Even to this today, there's some stuff that we've in place that aren't quite biblical. But Paul's laid out here.
And so this whole, I know we were talking about this, just the idea. It's like, well, this chapter isn't that exciting because it's just, a bunch of people's names and, stuff like that. But really what Luke is doing is he's going, this is a power struggle.
This is political theater that's taking place right here. You can think of there's all kinds of movies that people love to watch. There are these like political power play movies. Then this is it. Like these are chess pieces being shifted around the table, and it's getting tight for Paul right now. Like he's really looking for the most.
Love House of Cards. They love Secession. This is that. It's political intrigue.
Absolutely. So with what's happening here right now, again, they're wanting to lay an ambush. They want to kill Paul, and they're thinking, Festus, just move over here. We'll take care of the situation for you. All right, verse 4. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept in Caesarea and that he himself was going there shortly. Therefore, he said, let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man to see if there is any fault with him. And when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting at the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. Now, before we can see what Paul is happening here, it's interesting because Festus is not, he's new to the area. He's taking charge. I think it's interesting in the fact that he's not just going, okay, yeah, let me do this. It's almost like I'm going to take care of this, but you're doing it on my terms. I'm the guy in charge. You guys come to ask me for favors, but we're doing it my way. And he's kind of throwing it back in their court. But again, at the same time, he can't just hand over Paul. What is stopping him from just handing over Paul to these Jews in this situation?
Well, part of this is showing his dominance as a new leader, that he is not going to be swayed by the Jewish leaders. The other big thing is Paul has something those Jewish leaders don't, and he has citizenship. And that we've already seen him use this, but that's gonna be a big deal in his life. We don't know exactly how he got this citizenship. Part of it may have been that, again, we can go back to favors that, I'm sorry, I'm going to forget some names here, but Paul was born in Tarsus. Tarsus was a battlefield. So it was an important port city. And so I'm sorry, I think it's that there was a battle and they took the side of one of the Caesars. And that Caesar won. And as a favor, as a benefit to them, said, okay, you guys, you all get citizenship. And so that was a big deal. So it would have been uncommon for a Jewish man to have citizenship. And so you can understand, them at first not thinking Paul would qualify. But yeah, he knows Festus comprehends this.
Again, there's a phrase that's been out there that's been used in movies and other kinds of things. With citizenship comes benefits. And there is a benefit to being a Roman soldier at this time. And it's interesting because Paul, he's been writing this line the entire time through of having the benefits of being Roman, but also having the benefits of being Jewish. And sometimes the downsides of those things also, but he's almost pitting them one against each other. Not inappropriately, but he's trusting in the system that's in place where God's perfectly placed him at right here in this situation.
Well, he's living in the tension that I think most of us have to live in, which is, am I true to myself? when do I look at something that's a situation in my life that's advantageous and I can exert that right and yet still be faithful to God in that moment, So it's kind of one of these things. I thought this was interesting. The Fort Worth Star-Telegram, they did a poll, and they basically were trying to say, would our citizens do what the Ukrainians have done if we were being invaded? And the majority of millennials said, no, we would not. We would flee.
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, so at times you want the advantages of being a U.S. citizen, and yet there are times you go, no, I don't want to fight for it. And Paul's living in that tension where it's like, I'm going to tell you, I'm a Roman citizen. And then he's like, but I follow Christ.
So how does one walk that tension? Because there's the tension of there's the debate of I'm an American, I'm a Christian. And it's the American Christian or Christian American. How do you walk that line? How do you, Garland Owensby, walk that line and going, this is how I'm going to live my life as a Christian? Because there's some stuff that it's black and white. This is Christianity. There's some stuff that I don't think Jesus cares about, and we're having to make a decision based off of several factors. How do you walk that line yourself?
Way back in the day when I first signed up for Facebook, one of the things they asked was, what are your religious views? Or no, what was your political views? That's what it was. And I just put, Jesus shapes my politics, not the other way around. And I think the theme verse, Romans, Paul said, there's none righteous, no, not one. And for me, that meant there is no man on earth that is completely righteous. And there is no system, politically, anything that is righteous. And so I think we embrace the areas that agree scripturally, and we protest the areas that don't agree scripturally. And I think that's the value is Paul's in prison for protesting the things that the Roman government doesn't like. And some of that's just a misunderstanding. Sure. They misunderstand, thinking that the Messiah is somebody that's going to overthrow the government. So to me, it's like, I'm going to vote. And I know there's the whole thing where some people are like, lesser of two evils. God's never told me to vote for evil. But I do not think that God would advocate for us not being involved in any process just because it's broken.
Totally. I mean, Paul's in a process right now that is broken, and he's using it. He's walking through it as above board as he possibly can in the situation that he's in.
Yeah. Something else to point out on this is today, when we think about it, we can figure out how much it costs and how much private prisons make from jailing people. That's not their system. And we're going to see this once Paul does end up in prison. If your family doesn't take care of you, and if you don't have some patron that's sending you food and clothing and caring for you in prison, you're going to die there. And so Paul's letters, where he's thanking the Philippians for their gift, it's really important, because if he doesn't have support from outside, he dies. So in this sense, when Festus is trying to figure out, do I send him to prison or not? This isn't about really doing the right thing with justice. This isn't about doing the right thing when it comes to justice. This is about politics. Like, if I get rid of Paul, how does this benefit me with the majority of people? And the majority of people are still following the Pharisees and Sadducees and the priests and the Judaic system at this point.
Totally. All right, continuing on, verse 7. When he had come to the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem, stood about and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove. While he answered for himself, neither against the law, While he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all.
So they brought him before him, and they've laid out all these stuff they've seen lay out before him. But they had nothing to prove. They had no way of saying, hey. In fact, the previous chapter, when he stood before Felix, he's like, if there's somebody that accused me, let him show up and tell me show you what I've done.
Yeah.
And he's laid out the three main things. It's the law of the Jews. The temple had its own set of laws in place. And then there's the kicker. This is what they were hoping would get him killed. Violations against Caesar himself, which in that culture, if you violate Caesar, you're out the door.
Right. Well, and if we go back to the charges against Jesus, that was the problem. They couldn't find anybody to bring the charges they wanted, and truthfully. And so what they had to do, they had to pay a couple witnesses, because under Jewish law, you still needed two witnesses to corroborate that somebody had said something or done something.
Which is where two or more comes from.
Yes. And so with this, it's like, okay, these are serious charges, but you don't have any credible witnesses, to come against this.
Really interesting how we see this. A lot would happen to Jesus actually happening out with Paul at the same time. Like Paul's really suffering similar, not the same, but similar way of Christ, of false accusations, having to go through certain political stuff at the same time. Verse 9. But Festus, wanting to do the Jews a favor, there's that favor aspect that we talked about earlier, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? Now, before he didn't allow them to go, we'll come to Jerusalem. Why is he suggesting it now as a favor?
Well, I think it puts him in a place where they're going to owe him something, So I wish to do you Jews a favor. Again, the political circus. I do you a favor. Well, one day you're going to do me a favor that's going to benefit me and advance my cause and advance my purpose. Because really, at this point, one of the ways that you choose an emperor is it's not all biological. Okay, so in the first century, an emperor could adopt a young man, could adopt an adult man as his child and say, this is going to be the next emperor. And then you have things like Julius Caesar. You could just take it by coup. So we don't know. Festus, probably like any of these men, wanted power. So again, it's like, all right, if I go to Jerusalem, this is a very, very important city to the Roman Empire. And if I can get the favor of Jews in Jerusalem, well, that sets me up pretty well politically.
It's also interesting because the contrast between the front end and the back end of this whole conversation, it's we're not doing it your way. And now he's like, okay, now I'm handing you a favor. Like he's asserting his dominance, but at the same time going, I'll take care of you, but you have to work with me, play my game. Again, this is
all that.
This is a huge, crazy political landscape that's taking place. And a power plays that Paul is having to navigate while trusting in Christ at the same time. And again, I know a lot of people, there's not to get political here, but there's a lot of people that they get angry at politics and they try to manipulate things. You can't do that. The system may be corrupt, but you're living in the system. And you've got to trust Christ as you walk through it.
Well, if you look, basically, what Paul's saying is my hope isn't in whether the Jews are happy with me, and my hope isn't whether Rome is happy with me. That's not ultimately the goal for him.
Yeah, it's Christ alone.
Yep.
Verse 11. For if I am an offender or have committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying, which I think that's a bold statement. He's like, if I did something wrong, kill me. He's like, I am willing to take the punishment that's set before me by the legal standards, if they're real. Like, if I legitimately have violated these things, I deserve the punishment.
Well, and this goes along. Remember, Gamaliel earlier went and is just like, listen, if this thing is of God, just we'll let it we'll let it go. And if it's not, it'll fizzle out. And he gave, 2 other references. He goes, this happens. He's like, we don't want to make martyrs out of these guys, because martyrdom is what makes an issue explode. And so there's that. But I love that it reemphasizes Paul's ideology that if I live, that's good. There's a purpose for my life. But if I die, I'm going home. I'm going to be in heaven with Jesus. And so it's kind of the one thing. It's like we can get so stressed out about earth and all the things. Okay. So I told my wife, I said, I read an article where the U.S. government has updated their guidelines on nuclear fallout.
Yes, please continue.
Yeah. And I told her, I said, well, one of the things that was fascinating is it basically kind of said, hey, if you're not within 60 miles of this, just stay inside and you'll be okay. It's like, I'm not trying to diminish the impact, but it's like, yeah, unless you're right there in the zone, just give it time. The earth is going to spin and it'll go away. It'll be fine. But I told her, I said, you realize how many people are dealing with anxiety because of this? It's like, is today going to be, we call the return of Christ the blessed hope. I've always thought it's like, all right, if I was going to get mugged, people go, oh, there's nothing in your wallet that's worth your life. And I'm going, there's nothing on earth that's worth my life. You can have it all. You can you want to string me up? Fine. You want to shoot me in the head? Fine. Great. So while I'm here, I'll live for Christ. And if you kill me, I'll be with Christ. So this whole I'm going to kill you thing.
Can't threaten me with a promise.
Festus lost his power again. The Jews have lost. They don't understand. You ever hear this thing? It's like they're playing checkers and Paul's playing chess.
Exactly. That's exactly what's going on here. Again, this is his mindset. He's like, to die is gain in so many ways.
Yeah.
And he's okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's okay with dying. He's like, this is the law. Fine. Here's Jesus. I'll go out telling you who he is.
Yeah. The beauty about Christianity is hope. Is do whatever you want, and life can be miserable. This isn't the end.
To be continued.
So, yeah.
All right. The rest of verse 11 goes, but if it is nothing in these things of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appeal to Caesar. So again, he understands the law. He knows what's going on. He's like, there's nothing for them to accuse me of. So I'm going to go to Caesar. I'm going to the top dog right now. I'm wondering if some of it is he knows that if I go with them, that the ambush is going to take place. There's nothing here that says that he knows this, but he's smart enough to know these guys might try to kill me.
Yep. Well, and by appealing to Caesar, let's put it this way, in modern terms, he's in protective custody. Because if something happens to him on his way to Caesar, and now there are a whole bunch of issues beyond just Festus and his little gang.
Absolutely. Again, he's got to take care. Festus has to take care of Roman interests first. Roman interests is don't kill Roman citizens. Plain and simple. Even if you don't like them, you got to protect them. It's one thing for a Roman to kill a Roman. It's almost like the whole don't mess with my sibling. I'll mess with my sibling, but you can't touch my sibling, right? It's one of those things. Don't touch a Roman.
Yeah.
We'll touch the Romans, but you out there, you can't touch Romans. And that's what he's dealing with in this situation.
Yep.
All right, verse 13. And after some days, verse 12. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, you have appealed to Caesar? To Caesar you shall go. You know what? Fine. Rock and roll. Verse 13. And after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. When they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there is a certain man left in prison by Felix. And it's interesting that he says that specifically. To me, I'm maybe just reading too much of it, but I'm going, is he just throwing Felix under the bus? He's like, so I'm dealing with this thing that was left in my lap by the last guy.
Yeah. I mean, 'cause in any case, it's like most of us. We want the credit when things go well, and we want to shift the blame when they don't. And I think Festus is realizing, okay, this is going to Caesar. Do I really want this to be noticed in Rome? That I couldn't handle this on the local level. And so I could see him going, listen, I'm taking care of this the best that I can, but it wasn't my problem to start with.
Exactly, which is another sign of poor leadership, in my opinion. Own your mistakes.
We say that, an adult, if you're an adult, you don't blame it on somebody else when it really is your problem.
Exactly.
I was in class the other day and I was explaining something, and somebody was having trouble getting some software to work, and they're like, so I just don't do it. And I went, if your GPS goes out, find a gas station, get a map.
Right.
If you're camping, wait for the sun to rise or the sun to set, navigate by the stars. I said, you've got to learn how to be persistent. You just can't give up. So, okay.
Oh man. So just kind of a super side story about the whole like owning your mistakes, everything like that. We were talking about before the show about there's another professor that used to be at SAGU that joined the dark side, gone somewhere else, Dr. Magruder. And Magruder was my preaching prof when I was at SAGU. And I used to tell people, I was like, look, this is where I learned how to do stuff. And I teach kids how to preach here at our church. That's one of the things I've done several times is teach a lot of our young people how to preach, how to prepare a message. I said, look, and I tell people when I preach, like, if you like my preaching, blame Magruder. If you don't like my preaching, it's my fault. Yeah. So, all right,
but it is
completely off topic.
The thing I say in youth ministry is the youth pastor is never going to leave the church because he hates the youth ministry. If you hate the youth ministry, it's your fault. You're the one that built it, right?
So good. Oh man! All right, verse. I've lost track where we're at. Verse 14.
14.
Verse 15. And about whom the chief priest and the elders of the Jews informed me when I was in Jerusalem, asking for a judgment against him. Verse 16. To them I answered, it is not the custom of Romans to deliver any man to destruction before he is accused, before the accused meets the accusers face to face. It has opportunity to answer for him concerning the charge against him. So again, this is him laying all the cards on the table, going, look, I'm handling everything above board as best as I can. This is a terrible situation. These Jews just want me to throw Paul out there, but I'm taking care of the Roman.
And in the process there, it's in the process. It's not our custom. That's not what we do. There's a little bit of an elitist thought there too, where we're not like, because there was definitely a distinction between Jew and Gentile, and the Jews didn't like the Gentiles and the Gentiles didn't like the Jews. And so now the Gentiles are in charge. And it's like, well, it's our custom, and we know you guys have your customs, and the emperor's letting you guys worship the way you worship. But when it comes to civilized people, this is how we do it.
There's a little bit of pompousness, which we're going to see even more here in a little bit. Verse 17, therefore, when they had come together without any delay, the next day I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought in. When the accuser stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such things, I suppose, but had some questions against him about their own religion, about a certain Jesus who died, whom Paul affirmed to be alive. So he sums up all the accusations, their own religion. He's separating himself from the Jews. He's like, this is a squabble between people of their own type of thing. And then a certain man, Jesus. Now it's interesting that he says it that way, because he's going, I don't know anything about Jews. I don't know who this Jesus guy is. He's dead, but apparently he's not dead. I'm very confused. Like, you're seeing his ignorance almost.
Well, here's one thought. Who killed Jesus? Who put him to death?
Right.
The Roman government.
Right.
Right. He wasn't killed by the Jews. They're the ones that brought the charges, right? But he's killed. So how would it look for a representative of the Roman government to admit that they didn't do their job well, and that this myth of Jesus being alive was true. So there's some of the political theater there, and obviously he's not a follower of Christ. It doesn't mean anything to him. So all he can do is, I'm gonna give you the objective facts. We killed him. And this guy says he's still alive.
Right.
So, because even in verse 2, I was at a loss how to investigate such matters. He's not there. What are we going to do? So,
right.
Because part of the thinking was that the apostles had stolen his body out of the grave. So obviously Rome is going to admit, there's no one in that grave, but here's the reason: grave robbers.
Yeah.
That's common,
Yeah, totally. So again, he's just laying everything out there for Agrippa here. We'll jump down to 21. But when Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I could send him to Caesar. So that whole being kept there, it was saying that he's like, look, he's being kept, he's being secured, nothing's going to happen to him. Again, Romans take care of Romans.
Doing my job.
And we're going to get through this process as quickly as we want to get. Verse 22. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I also would like to hear the man myself. So he's intrigued. He's like, this is a weird thing taking place, which is interesting. I think a lot of people feel like in these terrible situations, God should just remove us from him and we should just move on. The fact that Paul's willing to walk this journey out above board as he is, it's actually opening the door for more people to hear the gospel. It's actually giving more opportunity for people to hear who Christ is and the effect that he has had on Paul's life and others. And this is completely a side type of thing, but I want to encourage folks, if you're going through hard times, it may be an opportunity for you to share the gospel to folks who would never hear it before.
One of the things that I was reading was about Agrippa is that he had a better familiarity with Jews and Jewish custom. And so for him, it was like almost bringing in a lawyer with a better expertise. So Festus is going, I'm not really familiar with all this stuff. And Agrippa's going, I've got more experience. Let me listen to him. Maybe I can give you some advice with the more experience I have with Judaism than you do.
Yeah.
But
that's cool.
So again, I'll do you a favor.
All the favors taking place here. Verse 22 or 23. So the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at Festus's command, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa and all the men who are here present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. So that's interesting. He said that the whole, he's done nothing to deserve. I found him, he's innocent for the most part. I almost wonder if Paul had not said, let me go to Caesar, he says, not judge me now, if he could have gone free at that moment. But because he had said, I want to go to Augustus, then he was forced, okay, you're going to go to Caesar then.
Yeah, totally. I'm going to do a little side note.
Yeah.
I found he had done nothing deserving of death. Do you know what the Greek word is for death in that verse? Thanatos.
Are you for real?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Thanatos. It sounds like somebody's name.
Yeah, somebody. It's kind of a snappy name.
So he's making that appeal to the emperor. So it's like, okay, well, it's his right. He can do that. And we maybe could have resolved this, maybe not, but we don't know. We don't know what Festus would have done in that case.
Right. Verse 26. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Therefore, I have brought him out before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examination has taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner and not to specify the charges against him. What has he just said in this situation here?
Yeah, he's looking for something, kind of grasping at straws. It's like, well, if I send him to Rome, I'm not sending him as someone who's broken Roman law.
Right.
And so I'm really kind of trying to figure out, as a citizen, he has the right to appeal to Rome, but I'm going to send him, and Rome is going to go, well, this is none of our business. Why are you wasting the court's time with a charge that it would almost be like you're making a small claims court in the Supreme Court. This isn't really where we handle these things.
Right.
So Festus is like, I gotta have some Roman validity to send him on to the emperor. It's it's Paul's right to appeal to the emperor, but he's going to go there and it's going to be the same charges that are religious. And now we're back in the same Jesus situation,
right?
That we've got. Are we going to have to make up charges that this man was saying he was going to overthrow and become the emperor? We got to figure out something to write if we're going to send him on to Rome.
Yeah. So a lot of, again, we said this at the beginning, there's a lot of power plays taking place, a lot of political theater taking place. There, again, while on the surface, this is just this is what's happened. Underneath it, all this shifting everything, it is political theater 101 taking place here. So Garland,
there's a really good book. I'm sure somebody's referenced this, but it's Misreading Scripture with Western Eyes.
Okay,
have you heard of that one?
I have not.
And it's co-written by a professor and a former missionary to Indonesia, and so they bring different understandings and really go behind the text. But one of the things they say that is very appropriate to what we're talking about is the things that are said without being said. And it's the stuff that's implied because culturally we get it.
Right.
So like somebody does you a favor, and of course in our culture you go, well, thank you.
Right.
But the thing that's not being said is, well, one day they're probably going to ask you for a favor, and you're going to choose whether you do it or not.
Right.
Well, the thing that's not being said here is, no, Festus, when they say respect, remember Bernice and Agrippa show up to pay their respects, as we would say. Well, it was probably literally payment of respect. And so there was probably an exchange there. It's more than just, hey, we just want to say hi. You moved into the neighborhood. So there are things being said. And that's one of the benefits to reading this historical cultural background and understanding what was being said without any words being used.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So what's your big takeaway, Garland? If you were to sum up this chapter, what's something you would walk out in your own life with this?
My big takeaway is there is a system and there is a process, and we're going to trust the system and the process to do what's right. But we realize that system and that process are being administered by fallen people, by sinful people.
Yeah.
And so ultimately we place our hope in the same place that Paul placed his hope, that if I die in prison, which he did, if I'm executed, which he was, I did the right thing.
Right.
I did the right thing. And ultimately this world has zero power over my eternal life.
Exactly. So good. And I want to kind of expound on that. He was failed by a political system and a religious system. Paul was a Jew. He lived as a Jew. He said he was a Jew of Jews. He just believed in fulfillment of everything that Judaism was looking for, which was Jesus as the Messiah. And so he was failed by, he worked within and lived by corrupt systems on every side of life. It's not just like some people there's a lot of church hurt out there. It's because people put too much stock in people, not realizing their pastors, their bishops, their Sunday school teacher, everybody, they're just as flawed as them. And our governmental people are the same way. And we have to be willing to go, man, I'm so sorry. you have fallen for whatever reason, but that's not going to affect my relationship with Christ. And we have to have grace for people, be willing to restore people also. But also we have to make sure our foundation is on Christ, not on our person. My relationship with Jesus is not reliant on my senior pastor, on my associate pastors. It's not on the president of SAGU. It's not on any leaders of any religious organizations. And it's not on the president. It's on Jesus and my relationship with him, period.
Yeah, it's so true. I've said that you put me in a room with the most holy person you know, and within 5 minutes I can get them repenting of something.
Right.
And we're all imperfect. Mm-hmm. We're all imperfect. And I think one of the things we need to work on is the way that the world that they would understand that we're not perfect either. And being able to communicate that through grace and the way that we interact with them, that we're all less than God.
Absolutely.
And our only thing is that we have recognized it, and to the extent that we need a savior.
Absolutely. So good. Well, guys, that was Acts chapter 25. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Hope it's challenged you. We want to hear from you guys. Reach out to us, mediahub@thbstreetport.com, or you can find Midweek Move on Facebook. Reach out to us. Let us know how this has encouraged you, how it's challenged you, what's your next step, and how can we pray with you? How can we pray with you through whatever you're walking through today? Garland, how can people connect with you, and what are some great things that you want people to know about?
Yeah, well, my website is garlandowensby.com, and I'm sure in the show notes or title or something you'll have the spelling of my name, but garlandowensby.com is my website, and I do comedy. You can find that on Spotify and iTunes and Amazon, all those places. So if you thought anything I said was mildly funny, I can tell you that there's better stuff. But then I think most of all that years ago, I felt my calling was to train ministers, specifically to train them to reach adolescents. And so I've been doing that a long time, and it would be an honor to be able to help anybody to do that. And so the way that we do that is through sagu.edu, sagu.edu. And we have both distance ed and on-campus programs for all sorts of things. But again, my calling is training people for ministry. And so I'd love to have that opportunity to do so. And thank you, Dallas. And I love what you're doing. And I just think it's cool. There's I talk about you in class all the time because I tell them, I said, I don't know everything you're going to do in the future.
Right.
Because I don't know your personality as well as you and God do.
Right.
And so I just think it's cool. There are these people that think doing ministry, it's like somehow you either have to be an athlete or a type A leader type person, or you got to play guitar. And I just love that we have people coming through that it's like, you would call it geek or nerd or whatever, but it's like God wants to use all sorts of people. Why? Because there's somebody just like you that needs to see Jesus in you.
Word. I appreciate that.
So I appreciate you. I love what you're doing.
Thanks so much, Garland. Well, guys, again, connect with Garland if you can. And hey, again, thanks for being part. I want to encourage you to share this podcast out. Don't just blind share it, but really ask God, who needs to hear this message? Who needs to hear this conversation? Share it out with them. And I want to encourage you to take the next step. Sit down and listen to it with them. Do the Bible study with them on your own, and let us know how you grow from it. Until next time, guys, have a fantastic week.